Qur'an came down as a final guidance from Allah, and yet we sometimes lack that bond with its words. How can we increase our relationship with the Qur'an through recitation? This and more on today's Women's AM. Assalamu alaikum, my sisters, and welcome to Women's AM. It's the show that brings you news, discussions, tips, and much more. We're live from our London studios, and in today's show, we have our roundup on the day's stories of interest in news bites, and we discuss a very important subject in her views. We'll be taking a look at recitation of the Qur'an, and we'll also be looking at a dilemma in our third segment. So, sisters, assalamu alaikum. We've got our lovely usual panelist, Zainab, and our special guest today, sister, should I say Dr. Abir Ashrud. How are you guys this morning?
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. I was thinking about what we all do for a living, and then I thought to myself, you know, it'd be really interesting to know what everyone would have wanted to do if they weren't doing what they're already doing. So what would you be doing if you weren't a doctor, Sister Abir?
If I were not a doctor, I would want to be an astronaut. So this is like my childhood dream. So I said, maybe I'll be a doctor, maybe I'll be an astronaut. So I'm a medical
astronaut.
doctor.
MashaAllah, that'd be amazing. What about you, Zainab?
I have so many interests in so many things, like from flower arranging to business owner to subhanAllah, so many things. Social worker, anything.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm a bit all over the place.
I always have, you know me well enough to know that as soon as I got a chance to travel, I do that. So I think if I wasn't doing this, I'd probably want to be a travel blogger, so traveling around and, you know, experiencing different cultures and that sort of thing. Yeah. So Jazakallah khair, sisters. So now on to our first segment of the show, News Bites. In this segment, we take a look at the day's stories of interest and we discuss what's been happening around the world. Before we do that, I'd like to remind you all that this is a live show and we would really love for you to call in and give us your comments. So, Sister Zainab, what have you got for us this morning?
Quite a worrying story. Parents are unaware of dangers faced by children on smartphones from the BBC. So it's just explaining that a poll was done regarding smartphones, and this is kind of the new piece of technology that a lot of parents are not completely aware of the ins and outs of in terms of how it can affect their children. So many parents will put parental controls on their internet at home, you know, their PC, that kind of thing. But when it comes to the phone, it's exactly the same thing. It has the same kind of access to the internet and all these other things that would normally concern us. You can have so many different types of social media accounts and things like that on your phone anyway, isn't it? So it was saying 1 in 5 children said that they had seen something on their devices that had upset them, twice the number parents had originally had thought. 20% of parents do not monitor what the children are doing online, and it goes on like that. For me, it kind of comes back to a central issue that these concerning elements of society are growing. So, you know, whereas we're trying to protect our children from these things, there's kind of all these other ways of getting to, you know, of this kind of influence, maybe negative influences of getting to our children, isn't it? So from the Department of Education, they released a document talking about the parental internet controls, and they were saying that key findings showed that pornography, sexual messages, gambling, violence, drugs and alcohol are amongst the top 5 harmful things which parents said their children are exposed to and concerned about. For me, it's kind of, you know, our children are becoming, again, you know, a casualty of the kind of environment that we live in. And, you know, when we've got values of, you know, freedom and liberalism and things like that, where it doesn't have any kind of boundaries to it, it kind of just, there is so much access to so many things, isn't it? So the sister from the Muslim Youth Helpline came on a couple of days ago, and she mentioned that there is a rise in phone calls about young men becoming addicted to pornography, and even wives calling in to say, you know, my husband is addicted, what should I do? It's just an offshoot of living in basically in that kind of environment. And it's just worrying that while someone is kind of making money and benefiting out of it, our children are becoming harmed.
I read something similar to that actually, and one of the points that I got from the article was the fact that a lot of parents don't have the technological sort of savvy knowledge to know how to either put in the parental sort of controls in place, or that they don't know that their kids are even more technologically savvy and they know how to get around these parental controls. So one thing that I got from that article is that maybe parents should get to grips with sort of the changes in technology and try and learn about these things so that their children don't fall into sort of the dangers of the internet, such as like maybe internet bullying or groomers or anything like that, and making sure that their kids really are safe on the internet. And I was thinking about it myself. I was thinking, there are days where I don't know what my son's been on the internet when I do let him on, and I think to myself, it's really scary because you do get pop-ups, don't you? And sometimes, no matter how much sort of control and blocks that you have in place, some things tend to seep through, doesn't it?
We were talking about a young man, a relative, isn't it? And how this young boy, he's actually very home kept, so it's not like he's out in the streets doing whatever, but he goes to school, he comes back home, his social environment is his family, yet he's kind of got a Twitter account that he keeps secret from his father, and he's following glamour models and things like that. That's purely just that one influence from school. You can see how it's affected him. But for me, it's interesting. This is an interesting issue. Where do you place the boundaries? Because you don't want to become so inhibiting upon your children, so inhibiting upon society. And it's interesting the way Islam deals with it. That we have this concept of taqwa, for example, fear of God. But that's a very simplistic way of understanding that. There's so many branch issues that come from that. One being accountability, that we do have this. This is the kind of personality we want to, build in our children. Yet, when it comes to wider society, it should also be implemented like that, where you don't have people who are able to do whatever they want, but there is, there's certain, regard in terms of how women are portrayed on TV and things like that, and that people aren't allowed to just sell whatever and whenever they want, and to whoever they want, even.
Absolutely. I actually came across this article. I found quite funny, actually. It's from The Guardian. It's Oppressed Majority, the film about a world run by women that went viral. So this is a short 10-minute film by Eleanor Pouriat. She's a French feminist. And some years ago, she made a short film about what the world would be like if it was run by women, so a matriarchal society. And what she did was she kind of heightened the sort of issues that women go through in a patriarchal society, and she transferred that into an opposite. And it follows this man called Pierre, and he lives in a certain unnamed town in France. And unfortunately for him, the society is run by women. So it goes through how he is sexually harassed and assaulted by women, how he's always getting certain comments, unwanted attention, that sort of thing. And when he goes to his wife to discuss the sort of issues and problems he's been facing, his wife would be unsympathetic, or she'd say, oh, I'm really busy, I can't really talk about this right now. And when he goes to the police station to report the abuse that he's faced, it's a female police officer who's taking his statement, and she's kind of raising her eyebrow quizzically, saying, oh, is that really how things have happened? And it was quite funny because it was supposed to show the sort of troubles that women go through, but the fact that she's switched roles and it was a man going through the same problems, people were all of a sudden shocked by, this society and how the man was being treated, when in reality women are treated like that. And I thought it's really, really funny that we have to do this role reversal in order to get some sort of empathy and understanding towards what somebody's going through, whereas if it was just a woman, it's like, it's not a big deal, you're just being emotional sort of thing. What do you think?
This is so important to raise awareness what's the woman actually facing on a daily basis, and this should be like eye-opener for the man, or even for the government, or for even the people who put the law. Like, this is what the women suffer daily basis. So I think this is so important to use, like, the media or doing this documentary about this. I think it's a good job. Like.
What was quite funny though, well, not funny but sad in a way, is that once her video went viral, she started getting a lot of abuse from people online sending her messages, and it actually shows the issue she was trying to raise. I mean, Zainab, what would you have to take from that sort of?
It's just really sad that you have to go through all this trouble to kind of shout out, please understand what we're going through, and it's completely unnecessary. And again, That's what I love about Islam. It's like it doesn't depend on the experiences and the mutual understanding of what's going on. Allah Ta'ala understands us, so He's created these laws specifically catered to what a woman needs, what a man needs, what a child needs, what society needs, what everyone needs, isn't it? That it's, you don't treat women like that because you don't treat women like that. It's unacceptable. That's haram. You know, that will be enforced against, you know, in Islamic society. So.
But it's nice though. It's a nice turn of events. Okay, Zainab, what is your next article?
A bit of an odd title from the Telegraph. Islamic preachers, the Pied Pipers of sexual apartheid. It's one of these gender segregation articles that keep coming up all the time, basically making a big deal out of nothing. Essentially, it's written in a very strange way. It basically paints a bit of a dodgy view of a speaker who is described as being moderate in his speech and the talk that he gave, yet he is ultra-orthodox in his view, because he basically, within the room, they enforced, or they had segregation, so the women and the men were sitting apart from each other. I just thought it would be useful to kind of maybe have some helpful pointers if we come across these kind of discussions, you know, in our daily lives, how to deal with it. First of all, gender segregation is not something that is imposed. For the people, especially who are sitting in that room, those people wanted that. You know, the men wanted to be apart from the women as much as the women wanted to be apart from the men. It is a mutual thing. Neither wants to sit together. Secondly, segregation. This concept of segregation is part of Islam. It's clearly seen in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. Even in the situations where men and women were allowed to kind of mix together, there was a case where the Prophet ﷺ in the marketplace would call for the women to be on one side and the men on the other, even when it was halal. And you can see there's this general understanding that just to be apart when you can be apart. But of course, there are many situations where we are allowed to be together. Again, what you see with the Sahaba and Sahabiyat, you see that they would learn together, gain education together. They would visit the sick. They would do Hajj together. You know, there's many different examples of that. But it's still something that is, you know, this is clearly part of Islam. It is not an extremist view. This is so that phrase ultra-orthodox is definitely trying to make that point. It is, and it has always been practiced by Muslims one way or another. Even within the family home, don't we naturally, you know, segregate when there's lots of family around? There's a thought there. And then another thing is that they tried to make it a women's rights issue, which is complete nonsense. You know, you have segregated schools, segregated gyms. You have so many cases where this exists, yet this is something that they want to make a point about, that these women are kind of held against their will. It's just absolute nonsense.
But it's quite funny because, like you were saying, even in normal situations, you know, people would want to naturally sort of sit apart, isn't it? Women always feel more comfortable talking with women, and men tend to want to hang about and chat with men. So I don't see what the issue is there. Mr. Abir, what's your take on this issue?
I think if we go back again to Prophet ﷺ life, there is not too much separation between man and woman. Like they were praying in the same mosque, and even after finishing the prayer, the one who collect sadaqah, he's a man and he go collect from the woman. When they do Hajj, they do it together. You know, like at that time the resources so little. We don't have these facilities now. Of course, the women, they have their own needs, and their needs is different from the needs of the man. Maybe this is for their own comfort. If they choose, they want this, why not? But like for education, they were together before at Prophet ﷺ time. So I think we shouldn't exaggerate in this. Like if this is for their own comfort, you know, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing though. There's a lot of things that's blown out of proportion, isn't it, when it comes to Islam. So unfortunately, we're going to have to stop there.